this is my review of Death Note. Okay, so for those of you uninitiated who don't know what Death Note is, it is one of the most popular anime that discusses the idea of morality and justice. So it's a very popular anime in the sense that it discusses the idea of what justice is, and is very heavy in religious tones and the like that. Basically, it's about what kind of justice is actually true justice, and by the end of the series, I'm just gonna spoil it. They never really come to an answer. It's just several different philosophies of justice that are thrown around, and it's kind of up to us to interpret which one is actually the correct version of justice. So it starts off with Ryuk, a Shinigami, who drops his Death Note in the human world. Light Yagami, our main protagonist, finds it one day after observing that the world is rotting, as he puts it, and finds the Death Note in his school courtyard. And so the Death Note is this thing where if you write somebody's name in it, they will die. That's the stipulation. The only thing you need to have is a name and face. So basically whatever name you write in the book, as long as you have a face to go along with that name, that person you're thinking of will die when you write their name in the book. So in that sense, the Death Note is very dangerous. And Light is initially suspicious of it. He isn't entirely sure if it's real or not. All he knows is that it just showed up at his school, and he's not entirely sure what it is. So he takes it home and starts thinking about whether or not he should actually write somebody's name in it, because at this time he doesn't actually know if it's legit or not. Fortunately, he gets the answer to his prayers when he's watching TV in his room and he sees a newscast of a guy who has held several people hostage. So, naturally, he decides to test out the Death Note by writing the guy's name in, and sure enough, 40 seconds later, the guy dies of a heart attack and the hostages escape the building, with nobody the wiser as to how the guy died in the first place. And sure enough, Light panics at first. He's not entirely sure what happened and believes it's just a coincidence that the guy happened to die as he wrote his name in the book. But he decides to test it out the next day and see, well, if it worked that time, that's probably just a coincidence. Why don't I try it again and see if it works a second time? And sure enough, he spent the next day trying to figure out potential victims. He initially decides to go with a bully he knows, but decides against it because he realizes he probably shouldn't be killing people he knows personally. So he starts going out. And starts seeing a bunch of people that aren't exactly nice people, I guess. They aren't exactly the nicest of people. They're kind of assholes, he's trying to figure out which one's the worst of the bunch to actually pick as his next victim. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, he goes to a convenience store and he sees a girl getting raped by a biker gang. So he uses the Death Note to kill their leader in a rather spectacular fashion. He writes the guy's name in the book. He writes how the guy will die in a traffic accident, and sure enough, that's exactly what happens. The main guy chases after the girl after she manages to escape, and the main guy gets hit, and his friends are coddling the remains, as it were. So Light realizes that that moment that is legit, and sure enough, as we find out later, he spends the next several days killing people. So Light is eventually approached by Ryuk, who explains what the Death Note is to him. He explains how the Death Note is in fact legit. He realizes that based on Light's reaction to how he's handling the book, the Light has become addicted to the power of the Death Note, and explains how the Death Note basically enables him to kill anybody, no strings attached, but points out that somebody can either be sent to heaven or hell if they use the Death Note. But also explains that if he doesn't want to be responsible for being able to kill a bunch of people, then he can always just pass it off to somebody else. But Ryuk explains to him that if he does that, he'll lose his memories of the time he had while he was using the Death Note. And sure enough, it's also explained that nobody else can see Ryuk except for Light. Explained that only the holder of the Death Note can actually see him. And sure enough, when his mom comes in to offer him some apples, she can't see him either. So it's immediately established that only Light can see Ryuk, and the two can and only Light can hear Ryuk. And sure enough, when Light asks him why Ryuk was doing this, Ryuk responds he was bored. So as Ryuk explains, the Shinigami have kind of gotten lax in their abilities to kill people. They, for the most part, they really don't stopped paying attention to humans in the modern times, and using their Death Note on each other is kind of wasted since they can't actually die. And explains that because Shinigami have gotten so lax in the way they do things, that they also get criticized for working too hard if they start using their Death Note too much. So Ryuk was just kind of bored and decided, I want to just spread death. So he dropped his Death Note in the human world, and explains that he didn't exactly pick Light, as it were, because as he explains, he really just put the book in English, and Light, who was an honor student, just so happened to be able to read English, even though he's Japanese. So he explains how he didn't really plan for Light to randomly wind up with the Death Note. It just sort of happened. But then Light explains why he decided to use the Death Note in the first place. As I established, he's seen a lot of people who are assholes around, and he decided, now that he has the Death Note, to actually do something about it. He realizes that he can use the Death Note to purge the world of evil criminals and create a world of peace. Basically, that's his idea. He wants to purge the world of criminals and create a world where there is no conflict, no war, no anything. And basically, he wants to become the new god of that world. So, Light's pretty ambitious, I would say. But in any case, Light explains that he doesn't really care what happens to him, so long as he's able to create a world with peace. And sure enough, he spent the past 5 days killing as many criminals as he could. So basically, Light wants to purge the world of criminals, and he's going to use the Death Note to do it. And I'm assuming and he also assumes that people are eventually going to catch on about what he's doing. So he kind of wants to make it so that everybody knows who he is without actually knowing who he is. So basically, Light decided to become a serial killer that kills serial killers. It's interesting. But yeah, that's basically what the idea of Death Note is. It's Light using a magical notebook he found near his school to kill people that are worse than him. So yeah, he wants to create a world where there's no criminals or anything, and he plans to use the Death Note to do it. And that's an interesting premise to take. So yeah, I can understand why people like this anime so much. I can understand after watching one episode. But it is an interesting concept. You put a magical notebook that kills people in the middle of nowhere. Some random ass human comes along and finds it, and sure enough, they start using it to kill people. And it's also been explained that this isn't the first time this has happened. There have been several Death Notes throughout history that have been used to do exactly this. But it's also explained that Light has been the most ambitious with his Death Note. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of dynamic this brings out, because as I said, it is very religion heavy and very justice oriented. It is strongly about the ideas of justice, and sure enough, Light thinks that his version of justice is a kind of justice in a way, because he's purging people who are from the world who are not exactly the best people to be in the world. He points out that only hardworking people should be allowed in the world, and since he himself is a hardworking individual, he thinks he's not going to have many problems. But yeah, this episode was basically to establish what the series is. It does a very good job of that by showing Light's slow corruption and as he gets absolute power over everybody and everything. So yeah, this episode does a very good job of showing Light's slow descent into the power. How it started off with him being hesitant about killing people, but over the course of 5 days, he's gone full on insane. So it is a great way to just see that slider slowly creep over to the insane territory of things until he eventually becomes a serial killer who attacks serial killers, as I said. But yeah, that's my review on Death Note. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!